everybody doesn't fall asleep. So suicide awareness and prevention, obviously very important for us. Also, like Sam said, I was not originally going to be doing this training. I found out about this on Tuesday, so I apologize if I stumble through this a little bit. Just be nice.
We are very grateful for your generosity, Megan. Thank you.
No problem. All right, so goals of this training. Sam, how do I make this not so that do you guys see like the things that I'm clicking on?
So in your slideshow, hit
Hit slideshow on top where it says slideshow. Hit slideshow.
Yep.
Mhm.
And then from the beginning or from the current slide, either one.
Thank you. I couldn't remember how to do that. Okay, so the goals for the training, increasing awareness, wanting to reduce stigma around mental health, suicide, and thinking about words that we use, how we talk to people, being culturally minded, safety planning. Also, I think suicide prevention and understanding is important. And the last thing is staff wellness, which I think is even more important, kind of. I think it's really important for us to remember to take care of ourselves. So, oh, no. How do I go back to the last one? See, this is a problem.
You can just use the arrows on your keyboard.
Thank you.
So, but Meg, we're seeing it as the actual slideshow. So
Okay.
you might have to change your screen.
Okay.
So if you go to viewing options.
Where's that?
Go down on the bottom where you see the plus and minus at the bottom right hand corner. There's a little.
I'll just go to your office real quick.
Yeah, thank you.
This is what I think the definition of teamwork is, guys.
Yes.
I love my team.
Help.
Oh, this is what it looks like on yours.
Yeah.
Oops. So this is. How does it look now?
Perfect.
Oh God.
All right, and it switched to a different slide?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions. This is part of the interactive part, so hopefully you didn't cheat and look at the next slide. So what percentage of people who complete suicide have a diagnosed mental health condition?
Probably a very small one.
Wait, what did you say?
What percentage of people who complete suicide have a diagnosed mental health condition?
None that I know of.
None.
I'm going to throw a number out there and say 20%.
I'll say 10.
15.
Less than 5.
It's actually, okay, so you guys are guessing low. It's actually 46%. So that's a high number, but it's also, if you think about it, if 46% of people who complete suicide have a mental health diagnosis, that's 54% of people who don't even have a diagnosis. So they're not seeing a counselor, they're not seeing a doctor to diagnose them with depression, anxiety, anything like that. It's just they're struggling and they don't make it through that. So that's kind of sad. So next question is, how much percentage-wise has suicide increased since 1999?
I think it would be more than the 46%.
30%.
Okay. Anyone else have any guesses?
65%.
125.
Kyle,
It,
feels good. Oh, sorry,
has
I'm not muted.
Love you. It is, where is it on my page? 35%. So the amount of people who have died from suicide since the year 1999 has increased by 35%. I don't know if that's because it's being recorded more. I don't know if that's because it's occurring more and information is not on here, but it may just be that people are struggling a lot more than they used to. Next question is, suicide is the blank leading cause of death in the US.
Third.
Nope.
I think second.
I think second too.
It is, where is it? The 12th.
Is the
Yeah.
first one obesity?
It doesn't tell me that.
Oh,
I don't have a chart.
Google it, Kara.
And the last one I'm going to ask you guys is just, suicide is the leading cause of death for what population?
Older white males.
Healthcare workers.
Adolescents.
I was thinking adolescents, teenagers.
I was gonna say dentists.
Older white males. That,
Yeah.
that one.
Yeah.
Gen Z.
It is actually the leading cause of death for people who are held in jails, so jail or prison. So those who are incarcerated are more likely to complete suicide. So I think that's something that's important. I particularly wanted to ask that question because we deal with a lot of people who have dealt with incarceration. So the likelihood that some of them may have either thought about killing themselves or have tried to kill themselves might increase based on the population that we work with. So I think it's something that's important for us to be aware of. These are some of the other statistics on here. I'll let you guys glance at them quickly. I'm not going to read them all.
Megan, is there any
And-
way you can send me that slide in an email?
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. I can send you the whole presentation.
That'd be even better.
All right, so does anybody have any thoughts, questions, things that come up as they look at this, or anything we said so far?
I think it's interesting, the piece about transgendered adults are nearly 12 times more likely to attempt suicide.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
feel as if that's something that we've definitely seen an increase in, and, you know, looking for ways to support that to try to hopefully take some of that number down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do know one thing that I do appreciate, just talking about the increase of transgender adults, you know, being more likely to attempt, is that when I first started here, I remember that we had someone who was transgender and they were put in the house with the gender that they were assigned at birth versus the gender that they chose. And now we've completely switched that up, and we have people who are it's the gender that they choose. We're going off of that and off of who the person identifies as versus the gender they were given at birth. So I think that's something that even just in the last 5 years, I've seen us work to make sure that we are respecting people for who they are, you know, and really surrounding people to help support them through whatever they need. These are just two quotes about, one's about counseling and one is about when you feel like things are being lost and you just don't have anything left to give. The one thing that I pulled out of the slide when I was reading it was the idea of the stigma around mental health. So we working in this field, how can we work to change that stigma? Is there anything that you guys do on a regular basis to kind of help with that? Or are there suggestions you have that we could maybe do? I don't know. Ideas, thoughts?
I feel like this is part of the self-disclosure if it's clinically appropriate. I have no problem telling somebody. I'm like, well, I remember when I was taking my meds and how long they first took me to kick in, or those first conversations with my therapist. Like, I think it's really important. Like, it's not a big deal. Like, this is just, everybody should be doing this.
I like that. I
One
agree.
thing, one thing that I can say, and it's more of a visual that comes to mind, is Kara's office door. And some of like our staff's offices. I think one thing that I've seen more consistently over the last few months is that it's okay to not be okay sometimes. And I feel as if one thing that we do really well in our agency is we acknowledge that if somebody's only at a 40% for that day and they're giving that 40%, they're giving 100.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's important. And the other part of it is that we are supportive of each other too. So it's like if I come in and I've only got 40%, someone else is gonna come pick up the rest of it and keep me going through the day. So that helps too. We'll get more into kind of that towards the end about the self-care stuff, but
And we can thank Kara now for her enthusiasm when we don't have it.
yes.
In the
Um,
famous words of Kara,
Or
period.
Heather. I get my enthusiasm from Heather.
I think we feed off each other and scare Xavier at the same time.
For us during our case management meetings, there's like certain areas that we're supposed to talk about and check in on each month or each visit.
Mhm.
And for me, I keep the same tone and the same baseline presentation or demeanor when I'm talking about things. When I get to like their substance abuse or substance use and mental health, I'm not like, so when was the last time you used, or are you
Mhm.
seeing your doctor? Like, just like I asked them, how's everything going with your apartment? How's everything going down at OSEC? Are you still seeing that? Like, very
Mhm.
making a conversation that doesn't change when I get to those areas that are considered
Mhm.
like stigmatized.
Yeah, I think, and that, I think that's really helpful because it does keep, it helps them realize that we're not judging them. And B, it helps them realize like these are things you can just have a regular conversation about. You don't have to be ashamed. And I mean, no, we don't want them to just kind of walk down the street and shout to the world, I have this diagnosis, but also you don't have to hide behind it. All right. So the next thing is about language and kind of the words that we use. So there's two separate things here. There's one, the one on, I don't know if it's on your left, it's on my left. The one that says terms to avoid and suggested alternatives. So it says, like instead of saying victim or survivor, it's person who has experienced or person who has been impacted by, addict, a person with substance use disorder, homeless person, person without housing, prisoner or convict, person who is or has been incarcerated. I think that says, I can't see it. So those are just kind of little things. And I know we talk a lot about the words we use in our agency, like kind of changing up how we talk about people, how we make people feel when we interact with them. And sometimes you see all these things and you're like, why do we have to change all our language? Like, this is just so frustrating. It's like, why can't, like, sometimes it gets overwhelming and then you're thinking too much. You're like, well, can I say this? Can I say that? What do I do? Am I going to offend somebody? Am I not? And then you just don't talk. And that's not a good thing either. I think it's, I don't think it's, I think I took it out of the slide, but it said something about making sure you're kind of using the person's language. So when you're talking to someone, if they use the word abusive relationship or they use the word addict, if that's how they identify it and that's what they want to use, you can use their language. It's something I was taught in school, like use the language the person is using with you. Now, if somebody is speaking about themselves in a demeaning way and using words, it might be a good idea to ask and kind of explore that, at least for those of us who are clinicians, but it can help create that therapeutic alliance if you use someone's own language. So yes, we need to be aware of the words we use, and we also need to be respectful of the words that people choose to use as well. And then I need to move you guys because I can't see this other box. Hold on.
Megan, this is Michelle. I know one thing that we do with teaching youth is in their approach to someone else, right? So you don't say, "Are you okay?" Because 99% of the time they're going to say, "Yes, I'm fine," right? And just shut you down. It's all in the approach of, "Hey, I see maybe you're not happy or not yourself today. Is there something bothering you that we could talk about? Let's walk and talk." It has a lot to do with the approach to that person and the words that you use.
Absolutely. And thank you for that, Michelle, because that's an incredibly important thing. I even noticed that in my day-to-day working with people. It's like, if you ask somebody, "How are you doing?" They're like, "I'm fine, I'm okay." But if you look at somebody and you're like, "You seem a little off today," or like, "Why do you have sunglasses on inside? Why do you have your hood up? Like, what's going on?" They're more likely to be like, "All right, blah, 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 blah," and keep going.
Right.
So yes, that's a very good point. The other box that's on the right, it says, this is more about, so I was fumbling over this earlier because I wrote it on a piece of paper. I put commit suicide or committed suicide. And this is talking about saying died by suicide or death by suicide versus saying somebody committed something. So what does it say? Commit implies suicide is a sin or crime, reinforcing the stigma that it's a selfish act and personal choice. Using natural phrasing like died by suicide helps strip away the shame blame element, which I think is actually true, because if you think of commit, I always think when somebody says commit, I think of like someone committed a crime. And it's like, the suicide is not a crime. I know maybe hundreds and thousands of years ago, it was a crime, but that's not how we live today. So that's one of those little shifts. And then there's other ones on here, but if you guys want to read, I'll send them to you, but I'm not going to go through all of them.
I wanted to say something too, Megan,
Yes.
quickly on that. I think also our documentation, so not only like how we're communicating to one another in like our team meetings and stuff, but our assessments, our progress notes. I know like in our assessment, we're asking about any exploitation in youth. So the way that we're documenting that somebody's reporting sexual abuse or, some type of exploitation in their youth, I think is important, considering that piece of documentation could potentially go to like a probation officer or, so if we said like was raped, it's just like considering the way that we're utilizing the language too then in our documentation.
Right. Like somebody, where is it? I think it's the bottom one that I can't read. Yeah, so it's like, instead of putting, like, even in that mental health part, instead of putting like Victoria is suicidal, it's like Victoria is like struggling with thoughts of suicide or has suffered through suicidal thoughts, like things like that, versus being like, it's that whole identifying somebody as just a single word, because you are not just one thing. None of us are.
Or like the example about prostitution, that's I think an important one, because that comes up in like the exploitation section of the assessment as well. A person who engages in sex work.
Yes. Yeah. And it sounds more respectful too when you say it that way, at least to me. All right, so the next one is just kind of so these are risk factors for suicide, and then we'll talk about suicide warning signs. So risk factors don't mean that somebody is feeling like they want to kill themselves. It just means these are things that could increase the likelihood that somebody would get to that point. So it can be exposure to bullying behavior. And I like that they have a picture of a computer here, because cyberbullying has become a very, very insidious, that's the word I'm looking for, problem. Especially with younger people, 8, 9, 10. People have smartphones and kids are mean. I mean, I'm not going to go into details, but we've got stuff going on here like right now we're trying to deal with cyberbullying things happening. And it's just like, it's a whole other level. Death of a family member, previous attempts, history of substance abuse, which we deal with every day, physical disabilities or illness, relationship problems, losing a friend or family member. Those are all, risks. Again, we're going to talk about protective factors on the next slide, which are things that can kind of, even if somebody has these negative things, there's also positive things that can help lean on the side of that's not the way that someone's going to go. Warning signs. You guys can see this. There's, talking about it, feeling trapped, having no reason to live, being a burden to others. I think those are things we hear a lot in here. Loss of interest, irritability, humiliation, rage. Again, moods that we see a lot. When we see people who are increasing their substance use, it's not necessarily a sign that they're going to hurt themselves, but that can also be a form of self-harm, is an increased level of using, because they just hate themselves. So they're like, who cares? Giving away prized
Megan?
possessions. Yes.
Oh, sorry, it's Kelly. I just wanted to say too, I think that, looking at risk factors, and it talks about, your mental health, if you're, prone to depression or anxiety, thinking about, like this time of year, come holidays, people who have seasonal affectiveness disorder, things like that. I always say from like Halloween until the end of the year, it's just such a crazy time.
Yes, you are 100% correct. This is the time of year where it's very difficult for a lot of people. It can be people are struggling because, they can't see their family, or it's the first time they've seen their family since they've gotten sober, or their family is using and they have to decide whether they're going to go see their family or not. And it makes it difficult. The warning signs, again, going back to some of those, calling people to say goodbye, acting recklessly, being really aggressive, isolating from people. Those are all things to watch out for. And it's scary sometimes when you're sitting with someone and you're like, is this the last time I'm going to see this person? Do I need to send them to the hospital? What's going to go on? And that can happen just in our jobs with people who are still actively using. But it can be terrifying. That's kind of why it's always good to have a second person assess the person if you're with them and you're not sure. Like, is this person truly going to hurt themselves today, or are they just feeling really down? It's always a good idea to have a second person look at it and be like, okay, what do we need to do? How do we get through this? Let's work through this together. Let's figure this out. So then, and one of the things we do, we're going to look at the safety plan. One of the things that we do is talking about protective factors. So being able to have access to mental health care, being able to have somebody to talk to, because sometimes the only thing people need is just somebody to listen so that they know that somebody's there who cares about them. That's all they really need. That's all they want. Feeling connected to a community, helping them learn coping skills to deal with when they're feeling really overwhelmed or they're sad, they don't know what to do with their emotions, helping them connect with their spiritual beliefs, discouraging suicidal behavior. Like if somebody is from a religion that discourages that, it's going to make them less likely to go that route. At least that's what this thing says. Again, I didn't choose this, but it makes sense. Then this is our safety plan thing. There is, I'm sure you guys have heard the CSSRS. We did a training on that. I don't remember when, but it's something where if we have someone who is actively reporting that they're going to kill themselves, or they've had a attempt in the recent past, we can fill that out. This is not the whole thing on this page. I can send a copy of that out after. It's something that it's a way for us to help gauge kind of how serious is this? What do we need to do? Do we need to call the ambulance? And, even if they don't want us to, do we have to be the ones to be like, hey, you know, this is for your safety. This is one of those moments where I'm going to break confidentiality. Like I have to call the ambulance and send you to the hospital. There is also, we have here the refusal of medical care. So like say we called the ambulance and they ran somewhere. They're not going to sign the refusal probably, but if you can get them to do it, might be helpful. This is what our safety plan looks like. We have this loaded in the public drive. One of the important things that you want to know is this part down here. This is peer or family member who is part of your safety plan. Making sure that we get the name of someone and then a release for that person on file. So that way, if, you know, somebody's, you know, calls us or texts us and they're saying that they're feeling suicidal and we don't know where they are, or we don't know how to get in touch with them, we don't hear from them. This is a person who we can call and say, hey, so-and-so express this, we don't know where they are. Can you try and help us find them? Or like, so-and-so is feeling this way, can you come stay with them for the night to make sure that they're okay? We don't have a specific release on file, but there's a blank one and there's also a collateral release that we can use either one, as long as we have something on file so that we can reach out to someone to help if we don't. Because like I had the other day, I had someone, I was on the phone with them. It's like, I can't, they're not physically in front of me. So to be able to have somebody else who I can reach out to and be like, hey, can you go to this person? Because I can't go to their house. So to be able to call somebody and say, hey, go stay with them, make sure they're okay, let me know what's going on. That's important and helpful. So, oh, I'm gonna go back. I forgot I had all this down here. So when do we complete a safety plan? Who wants to tell me when we complete a safety plan? Go ahead. I see your hand.
I complete a safety plan when they answer yes to question 4. Or if they say like, I haven't had it in the past month, but I have had it like within, you know, recently, then I just complete one just to be safe.
Yeah. So I actually pulled out the rules from our the documentation Bible, as Victoria calls it, I believe. So it's at assessment, you know, if there has been any failed suicide attempts in the last year. We definitely 100% need to get one. If someone is expressing current suicidal ideation, we need to make sure that we get one. We need to make sure that they're assessed to make sure that they're safe to leave. So the safety plan is also not just for suicide. It's for if somebody is feeling homicidal, if somebody is using excessively, if we're worried about that. So it can be recent overdose, high risk for overdose, either attempt or homicidal ideation, like I said. So it can be used for more than just one thing. That's why this is not specific as to what kind of safety plan it is. And honestly, sometimes I forget that we can do that.
Megan,
So-
what if you've got
Yes.
somebody who maybe isn't a clinician? And I'm just gonna throw prevention out there. So I've
Mhm.
got Josh over in prevention and he's working with somebody and he's identified that, you know, maybe a safety plan would be a good option. Where can he go about finding one of these?
They are in the public drive. I don't know, does prevention have access to 728's public drive or no?
No, we have T drive.
Yeah, which is the public drive. But what we can do, Megan, is we can send out a copy of this afterwards for anybody who
Mhm.
needs it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because that's a good question. And it's always like if somebody who's not a clinician, again, even somebody who is a clinician, it's always a good idea if you feel like somebody is really truly a danger to themselves and you are afraid that they are going to kill themselves or they are going to kill someone else, bring somebody else into the room and talk about it. Don't just try and make the assessment yourself. It's always better to have that second set of eyes. So the other thing that they have done, I'm sure you guys, did someone want to say something?
No, that's okay. Go ahead.
Since July 2022, I'm sure you guys have heard about the 988 number. That goes directly to the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, I believe. It's a lot easier to dial 988 than it is to dial the whole 1-800. So this makes it easier for people to connect with the suicide prevention line. It helps, they're available 24/7. It is available in Spanish, and you can either do a phone call or you can text as well. So that gives a whole bunch of options, because there are sometimes people who they don't want to speak. But they're okay with texting. So allowing them those different options, this has been very helpful. That's something to just keep in mind. The next, we're going to talk about us.
Oh, can I just throw something out real quick? There's also the Family of Woodstock Suicide Hotline. It's the oldest continuous hotline and warm line in the country. I actually did my internship there. It is a absolute 24/7, 7 days a week as well. And it's local. That is a really great resource as well. You can actually talk to a person immediately.
Can you
Yeah.
email that information to
Yeah, I was
us?
gonna say, can you email that to me, Kyle, and then I will send it out with like the stuff for this to everybody?
Yes.
Thank
Because
you.
they are a hotline and a warm line. There is some only
Oh,
take certain
nice.
calls, and they are both.
That's amazing. Thank you. So staff wellness. There's things on here. Communicate with coworkers and supervisors about stresses. Remind yourself everyone is in an unusual situation with limited resources. Okay, I'm not going to read all this. How about you guys just tell me what you do to take care of you?
Puppies.
Puppies,
Therapy.
therapy.
Just
When
love.
I get burnt out, I say I need a rest day.
Mm-hmm.
Leave work at work. Compartmentalize.
Mm-hmm.
When you feel some way, talk about it, especially with colleagues, especially utilize your supervisor as well. They're an
Yes.
amazing resource, and realize that there's different degrees too, and there's burnout. So you don't need to get to that point. So taking some time to actually do an inventory, self-awareness, self-monitoring because sometimes we don't realize our limits till we're already at it. And that's kind of like, we're trying to prevent that. So
Mhm.
that is very helpful. For me, that's very helpful. I'll say that.
Yes. Anyone else? No? Okay, I'm going to.
Vacation.
Vacation, yeah, thank you.
Taking
I
time
would-
to
What was
separate,
that?
taking time to separate what's important for work, what's important at home, and what's important to take care of me, because as a mom, often times I get overwhelmed, and as much as I love my puppies, I often want to put them in a box and ship them to my ex-husband, because as much fun as it is, it can also be incredibly overwhelming, and recognizing that I also need to take some time to do something that fills my cup.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So I would encourage you all to this weekend, if you can, take even 10, 15 minutes to just kind of check in with yourself and be like, how am I doing? Because I've had conversations with people here. It's like, we're tired. Like we work in a mentally, I see you laughing, Xavier. We all work in a very mentally tiring job. And there's physical exhaustion, which you get tired physically after working, and we can sleep, but sleeping doesn't take care of that emotional exhaustion. And that's where the taking vacations, talking to your colleagues, getting a massage, going to therapy, all of that stuff is very important, because that's how we take care of us. And that's how we can show up at work and be there for our people. Like for me, myself, I was supposed to have half a day on Monday because I had a doctor's appointment in the afternoon. And I texted Victoria yesterday and I was like, can I take the whole day on Monday? And she was like, sure. And I was like, thank you, because I am tired and I need a break. So it's about noticing those signs in yourself before you get to the point where you're completely burnt out.
You can also go to the Garlic Fest this weekend, y'all.
She really wants everybody to go to the Garlic Fest.
It's gonna be slamming.
Where is
All
it?
right. So that is all I have for you guys today. Does anybody have any final thoughts, questions, or things that they would like to say?
Hi, I just wanted to mention that there's a suicide walk this Sunday in Central Park.
Yes.
It beginning at, registration is at noon. And it's a great event, so anybody that wants, you can just show up and sign up and participate. It's a great event.
Awesome. Thank you.
And then I would just say, I guess a little FYI because I know someone had mentioned the suicide hotline. I know that for myself in the past, it wasn't while working with this agency, but while I was working at Hudson Mohawk, I had actually given out that information, not having tried it first. And when the person called, they weren't able to get through. So make sure the information that you are giving out is in fact active and, working, because the worst, that would just have been probably one of the worst things that had ever happened to me had she actually gone through with anything, So,
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely.
Yep. That's all I have.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. And please make sure if you haven't signed in into the chat, please put your information down in the chat so that way you get credit for the training. And thank you, Megan, for all of your expertise.
You are very welcome.
Thank you, Megan.
Thank you. I hope
Bye.
everyone has
Thank
a
you.
restful,
Enjoy your day
enjoyable,
off.
and cup-filling weekend.
Thanks.
Megan, call me.
Good job, Meg.